Officer, I'm going to ask you one more time. Did you identify these men before placing them in restraints?
Your Honor, they were acting suspiciously.
Suspicious or black? All rise. Admiral Marcus Hale, United States.
Admiral?
Yes. And those are my men.
Darius Cole grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, in a house where nothing came easy and excuses didn't survive very long. His mother was a school secretary. His father worked nights at the shipyard. If something broke, they fixed it. If money ran short, they adjusted. Nobody in that house had the luxury of pretending life was fair, so they learned early to be tougher than fair. Darius wasn't the loudest person in any room. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of man who tried to dominate a conversation just to prove he belonged in it. He was quiet, observant, controlled, the kind of man who noticed tone before words, the kind of man who remembered faces, exits, and details, the kind of man people underestimated because he didn't advertise his strength. And that one trait, the very thing some people mistook for softness, was exactly what Officer Daniel Brennan underestimated. Darius didn't have family money. He didn't have political connections. He didn't have a lawyer waiting on standby. What he had was training, years of it, the kind of training that teaches you to stay calm while other people are panicking, the kind that teaches you to slow your breathing when someone else is trying to speed up your fear. And on one humid Tuesday in late August, that was worth more than money, more than influence, more than any last name could have given him. Before we go further, think about someone in your life who was underestimated. Maybe it was your brother, maybe your mother, maybe your best friend, maybe it was you. Because this story is for every person who got judged before they got heard, dismissed before they got considered, and pushed before they got the chance to stand their ground. Darius Cole was 30 years old when this happened. By most measures, his life looked ordinary enough from the outside. He paid bills, he missed calls from his mother and called her back later than he meant to. He trained hard, slept light, and kept his circle small. But by one measure, he was anything but ordinary. Darius was a Navy SEAL, and so was the man beside him that day, Malcolm Reed. Malcolm was built different from Darius in the ways friends often are. Where Darius was quiet, Malcolm was easier with a smile. Where Darius measured every word, Malcolm could break tension with one look and one line. But under that difference was the same steel, same discipline, same willingness to absorb pressure without letting it own them. The two men had spent more than a decade being shaped by environments designed to expose weakness and punish hesitation. For Darius, it started young, watching his father come home from long shifts with swollen hands and a face that never complained. He learned that manhood wasn't noise, it was responsibility. For Malcolm, it started when his older brother got trapped in a system that had already made assumptions before asking questions. That memory stayed with him. It taught him that sometimes the truth isn't enough by itself. Sometimes truth has to be documented, repeated, defended, and carried all the way to the finish line. Both men had spent years learning how to read pressure, how to recall details, how to remain composed when the person across from them wanted chaos. They never bragged about it. It wasn't a party trick. It wasn't something they used to impress people. It was quiet protection, quiet insurance, quiet justice. And Officer Daniel Brennan was about to become their first real test outside the battlefield. It was August 24th, late afternoon. Darius and Malcolm were driving back from a veterans outreach event just outside the city. They were off duty, out of uniform, wearing jeans and fitted t-shirts, the kind of clothes that make highly trained men look ordinary to people who only recognize power when it comes with badges or titles. The air was thick. The road shimmered in the heat. Malcolm was arguing about food. Darius wanted grilled chicken and rice. Malcolm wanted wings and said he was tired of eating like a machine. They were laughing, talking about nothing important. Darius was thinking about whether he had enough time to hit the gym before calling his mother back. Malcolm was talking about a place downtown with terrible service and amazing fries. It was one of those small, forgettable moments that make up most of a normal life. Then the lights came on behind them, red and blue, flashing hard in the mirror. The SUV slowed. Malcolm glanced over. "You speeding?" Darius shook his head. "No." He pulled over, and in that first moment, Darius felt what any sane person would feel. Tension, not panic, not yet. Just that cold tightening in the chest that comes when experience tells you this might stop being ordinary very quickly. Because men like Darius and Malcolm know something this country still likes to debate as if it isn't obvious. Sometimes the danger is not what you did. Sometimes the danger is who the wrong person thinks you are. Officer Daniel Brennan stepped out of the cruiser with one hand near his belt and the confidence of a man who had done this enough times to think he understood how these encounters were supposed to go. He approached fast. No greeting, no explanation, no warmth. "License and registration. Both of you keep your hands where I can see them." Darius handed over his ID calmly and asked the most basic question any citizen should be able to ask. Officer, can you tell me why I was stopped? Brennan paused. It was barely a pause, maybe half a second. But half a second is a long time when someone expects compliance and gets composure instead. What Brennan had expected was fear or apology or eager politeness from men trying to prove they weren't a threat. What he got was a calm question asked in a calm voice by a man who did not sound rattled enough to be controlled. "Step out of the vehicle," Brennan said. Malcolm leaned slightly forward. "For what reason, officer?" That was the second pause. Shorter this time. Harder. And in that tiny gap, Brennan understood something. These men were not going to play the role he had already written for them. He just didn't know yet how far outside that script they were. Then it happened. His tone changed. "You boys think this is a game?" There it was. Not men, not gentlemen, not drivers, boys. A word that carries history inside it. A word designed to reduce a grown man in front of an audience. A word chosen not by accident, but by instinct. Most people crack there. Most people rush to smooth it over. Most people apologize for the question, apologize for the tone, apologize for existing in a body somebody else already decided was a problem. Darius did not crack. "Officer, we are complying," he said evenly. "We are asking for the reason for the stop." Malcolm added, "And I'd like your badge number, please." That changed the air. Because now Brennan was no longer dealing with frightened civilians. He was dealing with witnesses. He was dealing with men who understood that tone mattered, wording mattered, sequence mattered, and records mattered. He was dealing with men who were already mentally writing down every second of the encounter while living through it. Brennan called for backup. Another cruiser arrived, then another. That's how power often behaves when it feels itself slipping. The threat doesn't get bigger. The ego does. Brennan said he smelled marijuana. It was convenient. Vague enough to justify escalation, common enough to sound routine, difficult enough to disprove on the roadside in real time. Darius and Malcolm exchanged a look, and in that look was a whole conversation. They both knew what this was. They also knew what came next. They stepped out. They complied. They were placed against the hood. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Darius's pulse rose. Of course it did. He was human. They both were. Discipline does not mean you feel nothing. It means your feelings do not take control of your decisions. And that was the crucial difference. Brennan mistook control for weakness. He mistook calm for submission. He mistook silence for uncertainty. He was wrong on all three. Then Brennan made the mistake that would eventually follow him all the way into court. While patting Darius down, he muttered to another officer, not quietly enough, "These guys are always military until it's time to act like men." There are moments when a person tells you exactly who they are without meaning to. That was one of them. Not rage, not panic, not even performance. Just comfortable contempt. The kind that had likely shown up before. The kind that had probably gone unchallenged before. The kind that becomes routine when nobody makes it expensive. Darius heard it. Malcolm heard it too. And Malcolm asked in a voice so controlled it almost sounded gentle, "Officer, are you detaining us based on evidence or assumption?" Brennan snapped back, "You're detained because I say you are." That sentence hung in the air like a confession nobody in the moment understood the full value of. The search found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no contraband, nothing illegal, nothing suspicious, nothing but two men standing in public with the wrong skin color in front of the wrong officer on the wrong day. But instead of backing down, Brennan doubled down. He claimed non-compliance. He claimed attitude. He claimed he felt threatened by their posture, their tone, their refusal to become smaller on command. Backup moved in, cuffs came out, passersby slowed to watch. And that's the part people never understand until they live it. Humiliation is part of the mechanism. It's not just about control, it's about spectacle. It's about turning a person into a warning for everybody else nearby. Obey faster, ask less, shrink sooner. But even in cuffs, Darius stayed focused. He watched badge numbers. He tracked sequence. He memorized exact phrasing. He noted who arrived first. Who touched what? Who said what? Who looked uncertain? And who looked comfortable? Malcolm did the same. They weren't just enduring the moment, they were preserving it. At the station, the story started to fray. Because paperwork has a way of exposing people who rely on intimidation more than accuracy. Times didn't line up. Statements were too broad. The probable cause sounded recycled. Details that should have been clear were vague. Body camera footage existed. Dash footage existed. Dispatch logs existed. And the more Brennan talked, the more he created little fractures between what happened and what he needed people to believe had happened. The charges were weak, but charges don't have to be strong to be damaging. They just have to exist long enough to stain. Disorderly conduct, resisting, interference, the usual pile-on. Charges that often function less like truth and more like leverage. That night, Darius and Malcolm did not celebrate their release. They did not sit around reliving the insult. They went to work. Darius sat at his kitchen table with a notebook, a laptop, and the kind of concentration that makes hours disappear. Malcolm was on speakerphone going line by line through the encounter. They reconstructed the timeline minute by minute. They wrote down every quote they could remember while memory was still hot. They requested records. They identified witnesses. They listed every procedural inconsistency. They didn't write a complaint. They built a case. What they produced was not emotional. That's what made it powerful. It was precise, time-stamped, cross-referenced, structured, calm. They attached supporting documents. They matched officer claims against available footage. They cited policy, they cited procedure, they cited law. They had no high-powered attorney, no family influence, no friend in city government. They had documentation, discipline, and the truth presented in a language the system could not easily dismiss. The filing landed first with internal affairs, then with civilian oversight, then with the court where the charges were supposed to be processed like yet another forgettable case. But this one stopped being forgettable the second people started reading, because Brennan had assumed he was dealing with two men he could rattle. What he was actually dealing with were two men trained to stay composed in hostile environments and to gather usable information under stress. He had mistaken his target completely. The courtroom hearing was supposed to be routine, a quick appearance, weak charges, maybe a continuance, maybe quiet pressure to plead to something small and move on. Officer Brennan walked in expecting exactly that. He sat with the posture of a man who still thought the machinery would protect him. The prosecution sounded confident enough. The charges were on paper. The uniforms were in the building. The assumptions were doing most of the work. Then the defense began laying out the timeline. The officer's stop rationale did not match dispatch. The claimed smell of narcotics produced no evidence. The non-compliance was contradicted by body cam audio. The escalation appeared to follow questioning, not threat. The language used on scene suggested bias. The arrest report omitted key statements captured on camera. The judge's face changed by degrees, and then the back doors opened. All rise. People turned. Admiral Marcus Hale entered in full dress uniform, not for theater, but because some messages deserve to arrive wearing the full weight of earned authority. He was not there as a spectacle. He was there because he knew these men. He knew their records. He knew their discipline. He knew exactly what it meant that two Navy SEALs with spotless service histories were now standing in a civilian courtroom defending themselves against a story that did not fit their conduct, their training, or the evidence. Officer Brennan looked up and froze. There are few feelings more dangerous to an arrogant man than sudden context. The Admiral took his seat, calm, silent, present. But presence is power when it is undeniable. When asked whether he knew the defendants, Admiral Hale answered simply, yes, personally and professionally. He described them as disciplined, exceptionally trained, mission-focused, and trusted under pressure. He did not overact. He did not rant. He did not need to. The contrast was already devastating. On one side, an officer whose report weakened under scrutiny. On the other, two men whose entire professional lives had been built on precision, control, and accountability in conditions far more difficult than a traffic stop. That was the moment Brennan began to panic. Not outwardly, not all at once. Men like him rarely collapse in one dramatic instant. It starts in the eyes. A blink too fast, a jaw set too hard, the realization that the script is gone and not coming back, the awareness that everyone in the room is now reevaluating you, not them. The judge asked sharper questions. Why were the men removed from the vehicle without a clearly articulated basis? Why did the report omit language present on camera? Why was there no evidence supporting the claimed suspicion? Why did the escalation intensify only after the defendants began calmly asking procedural questions? Brennan's answers got shorter, less certain. He tried to dress instinct up as judgment. He tried to dress contempt up as officer safety. He tried to dress improvisation up as protocol. It didn't work. The charges were dismissed. But that wasn't the real ending. It was the beginning of consequences. The complaint package Darius and Malcolm had assembled moved fast because it left little room to hide. Every violation was organized. Every contradiction was supported. Every omission was connected to footage, timing, or testimony. Internal review opened, then expanded. Prior complaints resurfaced, other stops were re-examined, patterns emerged. And patterns are dangerous because they remove the lie of exception. Within days, Brennan was placed on administrative leave. Within weeks, an internal investigation widened beyond the original arrest. Previous complaints that had once been waved away as misunderstandings started looking different under better light. Formerly isolated incidents began to read like chapters from the same book. By the end of the review, Officer Daniel Brennan was terminated, not transferred, not quietly reassigned, terminated. And once the findings became public, the footage spread. People watched the stop, they watched the courtroom hearing, they watched the moment the balance of power shifted. And for once, the internet recognized the real story. It wasn't just that two men had beaten false charges, it was that preparation had defeated assumption. It was that discipline had outlasted disrespect. It was that somebody the system expected to fold had instead documented, organized, and forced accountability. The messages poured in from veterans, from black men who had lived versions of that stop their whole lives, from mothers who said they made their sons watch the clip twice, from people who admitted they had never understood how quickly an ordinary encounter could become dangerous when bias entered it, from others who said the story made them want to learn their rights, learn procedures, learn how to document the truth before it could be rewritten by somebody with more authority. And that may be the most important part of all, because Darius and Malcolm's story revealed something deeper than one officer's failure. It exposed the knowledge gap that so many systems quietly depend on. Brennan had likely encountered frightened people before. People too stunned to remember exact words. People too overwhelmed to file properly. People too alone, too tired, or too uninformed to turn their experience into a record the institution had to answer. That is not their fault. That is the design working exactly as intended. This case worked because Darius and Malcolm knew the language the system is forced to respond to. Evidence, sequence, policy, contradiction, documentation, that should not be rare knowledge. It should not require military training for a citizen to know how to protect his dignity when power starts improvising. But until that changes, stories like this matter. Today, Darius Cole works with veterans transitioning into civilian life, teaching them that discipline does not end when the uniform comes off. Malcolm Reed speaks publicly less often, but when he does, he talks about preparedness, not revenge. He says calm is not surrender. He says documentation is a form of self-respect. He says the goal is not to win arguments in the moment. The goal is to survive the moment with the truth intact. Officer Brennan is gone from the force. His badge no longer protects him from the record he helped create. And that is how accountability often arrives. Not with fireworks, not with speeches, with paperwork, with evidence, with a timeline, with one mistake preserved clearly enough that it cannot be explained away. Now I want to talk to you directly. Not about Darius, not about Malcolm, not even about Brennan. About you. Because maybe you've never been in a moment like that. Maybe someone you love has. Maybe you've always had that quiet fear in the back of your mind that if the wrong moment ever comes, you won't know what to do. You won't know what to say. You won't know what matters, what to remember, what rights you have, or how fast a normal day can become something else. Here is what this story tells me about that fear. It is not weakness. It is a gap between what you have every right to know and what you've had the chance to learn. And that gap can be closed. Not overnight, not without effort, but it can be closed. Darius and Malcolm were not superhuman. They were not born more valuable than anybody else. They were not protected because the world suddenly became fair. They were more prepared. That was the difference. So learn one right. Learn one procedure. Learn how to document an encounter safely. Learn how to follow up after the moment is over. Learn where complaints go and what makes them harder to ignore. Learn the language that institutions are required to answer. Because preparedness is not paranoia. It is protection. Darius and Malcolm changed something real. Not everything, not forever, but something. One officer lost the power he had grown too comfortable using. Other people came forward, a record got corrected, a pattern got exposed. And countless viewers learned that quiet preparation can do something rage alone often cannot. It can last. It can hold. It can force truth to stay on the page. That is a legacy, not a monument, not a headline. A quiet, permanent shift, the kind that happens when one person refuses to give up knowledge first. Darius Cole didn't have more courage than you. Malcolm Reed didn't have more dignity than you. They were not more human than you, more deserving than you, or more worthy of justice than you. They were more prepared. And in that moment, that changed everything. So here's the final question. What is one thing you are going to learn or teach someone else because of this story? One thing. Because sometimes that is how change starts. Not with a crowd, not with a slogan, with one person deciding they will not be helpless next time.